That's kind of the way our minds work. It's like a box of stuff and with a lot of sticky notes, and they're stuck to the wrong things, and we get very confused.
Welcome to the Expert in You podcast, the show for professional entrepreneurs, experts, authors, speakers, coaches, and consultants who are ready to elevate their business, expand their influence, and boost their bank accounts. Join us as we dive deep with industry-leading experts who share their top strategies, invaluable insights, practical tips, and personal experiences to help you achieve extraordinary growth and success. Whether you're looking to sharpen your skills, stay ahead of the curve, or find that competitive edge, this podcast is your ultimate resource for unlocking your full potential. So tune in, get inspired, grab your coffee, and let's unlock the expert in you. Well, I'm excited for my guest today. I have Mitch Beinhaker with me today. He is a business and estates attorney. Mitch, welcome to my show.
Thanks, Ann. Glad to be on the show, and thank you so much for coming on my show.
Yes, it was fun. I'm excited to talk about what you do with businesses. So why don't you just give everyone a quick overview of who you work with and how you help them?
Sure. I've been practicing law for, about 32 plus years in mostly New Jersey. I waved into New York a few years ago, so I do work in New York as well. Some federal tax planning around the country, but most of it's in New York, New Jersey. And I work with business owners to help them either start their business or update their paperwork or make sure that they're putting things in writing and following proper procedures, keeping up with things. I do a lot of small business purchases, helping business owners purchase other businesses or helping other business owners sell their business. And mixed in that is always, some sort of commercial leasing or commercial property purchases. And then I do a lot of estate planning and that kind of planning that goes with, the family-owned business and the business owner, maybe partnered businesses and things like that, because it all kind of needs to be coordinated. The only thing I don't do is go to court. And as a matter of fact, I told you about my book, which talks about a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about. It's about staying out of court, not about going into court. And a lot of times the problems that I get brought in on to solve for a client exists because they didn't do things formally from the beginning, or at least, once things got going. I know businesses get started sometimes, you and I go into business and we rent a store and we get all these plans, we're doing stuff. And then the business kind of gets going, but we never go back and put together an operating agreement or a partner agreement or, hey, what's going to happen if we don't agree on things or we want to separate or we just need to vote on stuff, like what stuff we got to vote on and what stuff we don't. So a lot of that stuff is missing with the small business owner. In the large corporate world, it's kind of required, especially if it's a public company, but even if it's a large corporation, so they have a lot of those formalities going on. But the small business owner doesn't really know what the term corporate governance even means,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you get to them and let them know what they should have in place and what they need? Because most people that are starting a business, they start a business and they really don't know what they're doing at all.
Right. Exactly.
The majority, right? So how do you really get in front of them? How do you help them to see that they need you right from the very beginning, especially partnerships? A lot of partnerships don't work, and there's a lot of reasons for that. So that's important.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is tied to the fact that a lot of marriages don't work. People working together is a difficult thing. It really is. And maybe we should do this for our marriages too. I don't know. But, the biggest problem, I think, is that it is very difficult for the dynamics of people's relationships to sync up all the time, right? To always be on the same page. And one of the problems, and I'll get to what you said in a minute, I'll answer your question. One of the problems, I think, is that, our minds don't work like the way we want them to work, which is we remember everything and our recall's perfect. And, if you and I discuss right now what we talked on my podcast, a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, we'd probably remember different things. So, that's kind of the way our minds work. It's like a box of stuff and with a lot of sticky notes, and they're stuck to the wrong things, and we get very confused. So the biggest problem that comes out, and the way I get to a lot of these people is usually through financial advisors, business advisors, business brokers, CPAs. I do a lot of education, a lot of online blog articles, which is where I just got somebody this week for a business transfer from parents to children. And the children have kind of been running the business, but they really haven't done anything to transfer the business. And then they read the article and they're like, oh, we need to do this. So a lot of that, and it's that kind of marketing and outreach that, reaches those people. But the biggest problem is that when you and I have an argument about what we agreed to do 6 months or a year ago, we are not going to remember what we talked about, right? We both may be wrong,
right?
Maybe somewhere in between, or you're wrong and I'm right, but we're both sure that we're both right. That's the biggest problem, because that's the way our minds work, right? We're from a self-defense mechanism. We just kind of, just convince ourselves that what we believe and what we think in our mind is the truth, right? We don't say, oh, I'm not going to remember anything. I question my memory all the time because I work in this area. So, the biggest problem is, as people get started in business, when I meet these younger businesses, if I meet them early enough, right, I try and encourage them to have, the basic documents in place, which would be like either an operating agreement or bylaws, if it's a corporation or an LLC, right? The rules of operating your business. What things can I do? What things can you do? What things do we have to decide together? What things have to be unanimous? How do we break a tie? If there's two of us, it's harder. What do you do? Do we have advisors that get involved? I mean, how do you really deal with that? And what if someone, God forbid, passes away or becomes disabled? Or they just are done. They don't, I had a lot of that in the pandemic. People were just like, I'm done. I just don't want to do this every morning, getting up at 4 a.m. to go to the bakery and to start, cooking up our stuff. And the other person's like, well, I'm not done working. And then they get in arguments over, spoons and bowls and Instagram pictures and recipes and ridiculous stuff, So it's a good lesson, and I think it's a good lesson for life, but put things in writing. Just when you decide what it is, there's nothing wrong with. Matter of fact, it's a good practice to say, okay, well, let's just write down what we agreed to. Let's both review it back and forth. I don't know if you always need attorneys involved, but you may need attorney involved. It's a more complicated document, right? That has to go to court at some point. But write down the things that you agreed. So you have, hey, listen, today is April 7th, 2025. We met and we talked about this for our agreement for our business. These are the rules that we're doing. And now we're going to go and get a lawyer to make it more formal. And then you have a document you've documented what you've discussed. You and I both know, when you have a board meeting, you take minutes.
Right.
That's not for just fun. That's
right. There's a reason.
Yeah. Somebody later says, hey, did you vote on that? Or what was that discussed? You can go back to the minutes and say, hey, yeah, we discussed it on this date. And that's how we did it. And I find that's a huge problem with businesses. Most partnerships break up. Well, we know a lot of them break up regardless, but they really get involved in really ridiculous and costly, both mentally draining and, financially draining disagreements when things are just, not put in writing. Where maybe you're not so happy about it, but at least well, it's what we agreed to. So those are the rules, and that's what we're stuck with, as opposed to arguing about it. And that's when litigation gets very involved and complicated, and, judges and hearings and affidavits and, depositions. I mean, it gets very, very, very expensive. And I think you and I spoke about this. It also takes away all your energy that you should be using to move your life forward.
Yes.
Whatever it is you're doing, right? That's the biggest loss. It's not what you lose from the business, right? With this thing failing and you didn't put it in writing. Okay, fine. Which is why I often, talk clients off the ledge when we're negotiating something. We don't have things well put in writing because they didn't meet me at the beginning. Let's just try and make a deal here so you can move on with your life.
Right.
And then coach with you and become successful. Why waste your time fighting over these things that just going to end up, hurting both of you anyway?
It really does wreck a lot of things. I don't think a lot of people think about that. There's the cost of the business not moving forward. And so you've got that lost revenue, but you're probably bringing that home to your family or to your spouse. It is sucking the air out of the room, probably every time
your marriage at home and your relationship with your children, you're aggravated all the time. Yeah.
It would be nice if you could completely separate those things, but the reality is you're still one person,
right? And
you can't compartmentalize. I mean, your business life flows into your personal life. Your personal life flows into your business. So that's so true. What is the rate of failed partnerships? I know it's extremely high, and I used to know this, but I haven't.
Oh, it's 80% inside.
Yeah, it's real high.
It's very high, and that doesn't include the ones that probably struggle after 5 years and people are miserable in their business. I mean, I have people all the time. Oh yeah, we've been busy for 15 years. I've been miserable for 12 of them. Like, why are you going through that? Yeah. Because look, I'm not saying that things aren't still difficult. They are difficult, but at least like you said, if things are in writing, you got the rules, fine. You follow the rules, you fix the problem, you move on with your life, and then you can get back to trying to be successful and doing the things you want to do and staying focused. If you're arguing over what the rules even are, and who said what, right? And then you go home aggravated, and you're not nice to your wife or your husband, and you're not nice to your children, and you're not nice to be around, and then it's affecting all of your relationships. I was like that. You got to find life-work balance. Well, life and work just kind of go together, especially nowadays.
They do go together. I always say the pendulum swings one way for a while, and then you have to swing it back the other way for a while. And
I think if the overlap was like this before the pandemic, now it's like this because we work from home. We're constantly. Yes. I get emails. I shouldn't say this on a podcast, but I'm going to say it anyway. I get emails from people for business clients, maybe people from a title company. If I got closings going on because they're all deadlines at like 9:45 on a Saturday night. Like, I know these people don't even own the business. Like, why are they even sending this out? And I don't respond because my weekends are for my family and my personal life. And if it's an emergency, I will respond. But, if it's not an emergency, you can wait till Monday. They're not going to die on the operating table, not with you and me.
Yes.
So, and people they don't find that difference. So I think that if we set up rules, I'm a big proponent, obviously, of putting things in writing. We set up rules. We deal with our clients that way. We deal with our, let's say, vendors or suppliers that way. We deal with our partners that way. And we make it a habit to do that. I've had people say to me, I'm not comfortable like whipping out a contract in front of a client or a customer. Well, if you look at it that way, you're always going to have a problem, right? But you should make, like, professionals do things like that, right?
Right.
Like, nobody's surprised when I ask them to sign a retainer agreement with their lawyer.
Right.
They expect that.
Yes.
So,
well, and I think it does elevate you to more of an expert status or more of a pro status. But I want to hit on a few things that you talked about. Sure. First of all, you said people don't remember, right? It's really interesting. I was just on a call with a client a few days ago, and she said, we've been together for a long time. She has been really with me for a long time. And she said, why did I originally come to you? I'm even trying to remember because so many things have changed and shifted, and I'm still working with her. And I said, you know what? I'm not even sure I'm going to have to go back to the agreement and look at all the forms you filled out. Yeah. And find out. She goes, that would be really interesting to know, but that's a perfect example of you just don't remember. Yeah. And even there also is confusion a lot of times around things that you're telling a client you're going to accomplish and how they perceive that you say that. Right. So that's really important as well to just establish what it is, what your work is going to be together and what that looks like. And then I don't like to say make guarantees, but you're putting in some kind of result or something that you're going to accomplish together, even if that's a series of steps. So it's important that all of that is laid out. But here's the other thing, Mitch. When you were talking, one thing that came to my mind is prevention is one of the hardest sales to make.
It is.
Because people don't do things.
Right.
People don't do things until it happens to them, or they don't do things until they've hit rock bottom or whatever it is, right?
Something else happens.
We're kind of wired like that in a way. So how do you get people to see this is something they really need to invest in? Especially in like that startup phase, how do you get that belief shift to them or inspire them to put the right things in place? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's a very good question because you can't imagine how many people I meet who have 3 children and they've never had any wills or anything like that.
Yeah,
survived,
right.
But their brother-in-law got sick and they said we got to do this. They were the lucky ones that something didn't happen. And I do have families where suddenly the father passed away and their whole family's up in arms and the business and they got nothing in writing. I mean, nothing, no wills, nothing. They don't know where anything is. It's just a mess. So I think, to a large extent, if money is really, if budget is not that much of an issue, right, where they can spend some of the money up front, I take it as a given that this is kind of what you need, right? What I used to do was if you just get started, we'd open an LLC, you'd have a certificate, we'll work on an operating agreement, let's do that later, whatever. And over the years, I've kind of learned that really that should just be the package from the beginning, right? So if they are getting started and money is an option, is an issue, which it is with a lot of people, right?
Sure.
I'll do it kind of in steps. Listen, this is what we need to do. You need to start out with an operating agreement and your formation certificate. And maybe I'll spread that out over a month or two if I really have to. Prefer not to. I got to pay my bills too, but if I have to, I'll work with them. Up front, I might give them a little bit of a discount if they got referred by other professionals, which they often are. If they have to do it over time, I wouldn't discount it, but I would do something like that. And then as they grow, we would start looking into other things like a buy-sell agreement. But some of them may need, they may need a client agreement right away. And, it's $1,500 with a blink because that's like 3 hours of my time. So, money goes real quick. So, you're right. That's one of the problems is we are selling prevention is hard when it costs you money and you've got all these different places where you need to put your $1.
Right.
They have to pay the landlord. They have to pay the utilities. They got to pay the, whatever is due to the state. They don't have to pay their lawyer because nothing's happened yet. But if something does happen, then you got to go to a lawyer who's willing to backdate documents to create things that didn't exist. I mean, you're basically asking a professional to commit fraud, which he doesn't want to do. So you got to find a balance there in terms of it is almost a requirement that you do those things ahead of time so you are, protected. Now, having said that, there's ways to do things, more simply to start and get more complicated later on. I'm not a big advocate. I should send it to you. I just got an article published on the title that my publicist was something like, AI is not your lawyer or something like that. It was about using AI for the law, the things that AI really can't do. It can write contracts for you. The difficult thing is you don't really know why paragraphs are in there or not, and I do. So if an AI chatbot, puts together a contract, puts in certain paragraphs, you're going to say, well, that sounds really good, but you don't really know what they mean and why they're there. And I'm not a big advocate of using it, but if you really have no money to start and you're really bootstrapping and you're short on things, you spend some money on the legal stuff and maybe some of it you work together with an AI bot, but maybe you want to run it by somebody. I don't know. It's a dangerous way to operate, but it's better than operating with zero, right? With a blank piece of paper and nothing signed by a client,
Right. One of the things I heard many years ago, I would just love to, it kind of came to my mind. I would love to get your thoughts on this, is somebody said, when you're a small business, and depending on who you work with, you may not need something that's completely robust, that's 15 or 20 pages, or a contract or an agreement that's really that robust. In fact, it's better to keep it simple. I would love your take on that. Hi, friend. I have an exciting announcement. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Expert in You podcast, but I have to ask you, have you checked out the latest issue of Expert in You magazine yet? It's jam-packed with rich content, powerful strategies, inspiring stories, and so much more to help you elevate your business and personal growth. Don't miss out. Go grab your digital copy now and join our community of experts making a difference every day. Go to expertinyoumagazine.com and check out your digital copy today. Transform your expertise into success with Expert in You magazine. It's not just a publication, it is a movement.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big advocate of that. I think that, not to, criticize my colleagues, I think a lot of times things are, maybe out of a need to make it look like you know what you're doing and they're getting a lot of value, that they come up with these really complicated contracts. I think first of all, if it's early days of the business, things can definitely be simpler. I also think that, simpler and easier to understand agreements are easier to work with your clients and your and your customers and your partners, and everybody kind of understands what they're reading. You don't want to call your lawyer every time you take out a contract because you can't explain what a paragraph means.
Exactly.
So I try to write things pretty easy to understand, knowing that I'm still kind of keeping within the terms of the law and what I know a judge would interpret and other parties would interpret. There are certain clauses that I always like in agreements that are not, too difficult and don't make a contract long. Things like non-disparagement, like, every contract should say, you don't post and say bad things about me, and I'm not going to say posting bad things about you. I once had a client, we were settling a contract, and there was an agreement. There was a non-disparagement clause in there, agreed to by both parties, and he was all upset that he couldn't post anything bad about the person that he's settling this thing with. I said, that's the whole point of settlement, so you don't go and say bad things about each other. And then there's other, there's ambiguities clauses that basically say, listen, I drafted this, you reviewed it. If anything's ambiguous, just hold it against one or another. We got to interpret it. So there's a few of those, but for the most part, you can probably, keep it to a couple of pages without getting, too crazy. Some things that have, scope of work, from creative people. It gets more involved. But a lot of those times what I'd like to do is you do a really good basic contract, couple of pages, and then you do an addendum. That's the scope of work. So you refer to that, and they can change that, modify it, mark it up and stuff without it getting buried in the contract. Like videographers and wedding planners and, artists and, things like that who are doing things for people.
Right. So what's your best way to get clients then, Mitch? Do you go out and speak? You said referrals. That's great.
Yeah. My best way is, I have a huge networking network of financial professionals and other professionals that I work with and people that I do. Definitely all the social media and email and blog marketing that I do. Definitely I got articles that fly around, and you mentioned to somebody about this and they said, Mitch just wrote an article, and I send it over and I meet people. I do some speaking, not as much as I used to. I used to,
and you have your show though. You have your podcast.
The show, yeah, definitely is a content creator. But I think if you want to, for any business owner out there who's looking to promote their brand and promote their business, online, offline, whatever it is, I think being an authority, right, in what you talk about and being consistent and talking about the things that you think are important for a business owner, because that's what I focus on, so that's what I talk about, eventually comes back to you. But it's a long game. It's not a short game. It's not, put a billboard up on the highway and all this business comes to you. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
For me.
So do you, when you are taking on, let's say, a startup, what percentage of your business is more the bigger companies, the bigger businesses, and what percentage of your businesses is more in the startup phase? I
would say probably 80% of my businesses are, beyond startup. I don't work with businesses generally that are doing, 50, 100 million of revenue. I have family-owned businesses that are doing a lot of revenue, but generally probably in the, $5 to $25 million revenue range, where they got a bunch of employees and they've been doing things and they're leasing space and they need, regular ongoing things. They may be on retainer. I have a retainer program for different clients where they get discounts in other work. And then they can just call me and ask me as many questions as they want without me having to send them a bill all the time. So I have those I even have a retainer program for startups where I think it's $8.99 a month, but for the first 6 months, it's only $1.99. They're just getting started, and we get going. And sometimes I do that to create all the documents for them. There's obviously a minimum charge if they were to cancel in 2 months, but you just kind of spread out because cash flow is everything to people these days.
Right.
So that's kind of how I generally work with people, and those are the kind of businesses that I work with. Some of them are startups, just getting them going. But often what happens is I get them started, I set them up, then I don't hear from them for a while because they're trying to, I've done the legal stuff, it's all in place, and then, they're kind of off doing their work until I hear from them later on there's a problem or something.
Yeah. I love too that you help them if they're wanting to expand or buy out maybe competitors. I used to, when I was coaching a lot of small businesses, that was a scale strategy we used where they could buy out their competitors and just add to their business and expand their market. And
I have some retailers that buy small shops, and the only thing they really want is the mailing list and what are their leftover inventory. They don't even, they run the lease out and they sometimes even close the location. They're just looking to have more people to market to. So it's a good strategy.
No, that's great. Anything else that you would like to bring up or talk about that we maybe haven't touched on? I want to give you the floor here.
I don't know. I think that I think that's pretty much it. I mean, that's my side on the legal side. You do things on the scaling side and on the business production side. I always love to talk about that stuff, and how I run my practice and do that kind of stuff. But when it comes to the legal side of business, people should, find a local attorney. It doesn't have to be at a large firm. It can be a local practitioner. There's plenty of us I think 1.4 million attorneys in the United States. I think 80% of them are in 1 to 10 man practices or something like that.
Right.
Very small, 2 to 5 maybe.
And they're all looking for business. So, hey,
they're all looking for business. But find somebody who can know you and know your business. Maybe you do pay them a small retainer every month to be available to you, but they know your business. And when something comes up, they're ready to deal with that. They don't have to spend 15 hours learning your business and finding all these parts and what's missing and so forth. And it's a good, just like we have an accountant, you should have a relationship with an attorney. So
yeah. Do you think the attorney, and this is just kind of an industry or question, do you think the attorney landscape, the business has changed for you guys because maybe the pandemic where a lot more people are working from their homes, or are they still getting the big offices? What do you see out there in your industry? I'm just curious.
That's a good point. I have, I don't know if the offices have changed that much. A lot of people work from home now at the bigger firms that I know. They're in 2 days, they're out 3 days, whatever. I think a lot of these changes have helped people like me who have small firms. I've gotten a lot virtual. I was doing it before, but really afforded me the ability to do that. And I think a lot of the new technology, like these AI chatbots, will be more detrimental to large firm practices and be helpful to smaller firms and smaller practices that don't need the support that the bigger firms are loaded up with, all kinds of employees. I do a lot of stuff. I don't need really that much support. Now, I'm not a litigator, so I don't need to manage a litigation calendar, but I don't need a full-time executive. I have a paralegal for certain things. I have a VA that does all of my, virtual assistant that does my marketing and the podcast stuff, and blogging and all that kind of stuff. I don't have anybody who sits with me answering my phone. I just don't need that anymore. And I don't.
More of a boutique business, yes.
Yeah, and people don't need to hear a live voice all the time. At least not when it comes to working with me. I get back to them very quickly. I at least text them and say, I got your message. Here's a link to my calendar. Can we pick a time to talk? It's just to have somebody sitting there answering the phone. It just doesn't make any sense anymore. So I think a lot of the change in the landscape is going to be advantageous to the huge number of very small practitioners in the United States. And, it's going to be different for government, corporate, and big law, going forward.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I always think it's fun to see behind the curtain in people's businesses and see what's going on in your industry that, because I'm not in that world, right? So this has been great, Mitch. So final thoughts, and then we'll wrap it up.
No, I mean, my final thoughts is I'm lucky that I met you. I think you have great ideas and all exciting stuff that you're doing. I look forward to staying in touch with you.
Thank you.
And if people are listening, I didn't mention before, the book is called 10 Ways to Get Sued by Anyone and Everyone, Small Business Owner's Guide to Staying Out of Court. I don't have a graphic of it, but it's on Amazon, so they can always find it there. I think it's an Audible too. We did an audio.
We'll put that with the show notes too, so people can go grab it. Yeah,
that'd be great. And it's not a story; it's like a guide. So each chapter talks about different things. I interviewed other attorneys in there. So if you want to work on an operating agreement, go to that paragraph, that chapter. You want to work on a business agreement, go to that chapter. If you're worried about, insurance and protecting yourself, go to that chapter. You can learn all the different things that I put together.
Awesome. Well, we will put all of that information with the show notes so people can connect with you. What's the best platform to connect with you on, Mitch?
LinkedIn definitely is probably my favorite. I think you can find reels on Instagram from the podcast. The website's beinhakerlaw.com, but also mitchbeinhaker.com is a personal brand, platform. It's got the book, it's got some other ebooks, it's got the videos. When we put this together, we can put a link to this show on the website. So those are the best ways to get me.
Awesome. Well, thank you. This has been fun. And you've had such great insights. You've shared such great information here that everyone needs to know. So I appreciate that you came on, and it was a pleasure to get to connect with you again too, Mitch.
Thanks so much, Ann.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for another episode of Expert in You podcast. I'm your host, Ann Carden, and make sure that you like the show, subscribe to the show. We're trying to get it up to the top 1 to 2% of podcasts, and we are climbing. So make sure you share it and share it with other people too. I always say sharing is caring, and let us know what you think. So God bless you. Have an amazing day and go rock your business. Bye-bye. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. Although I share strategies, ideas, and success stories based on real experiences, results are never guaranteed. Every business is unique, and outcomes depend on individual effort, market conditions, and many other factors. By listening, you agree that I and my guests are not responsible for your results or actions based on the content shared. Thank you for tuning in today. If you're as excited as I am about scaling up your influence, business, and bank account, then I have just the thing for you. But first, make sure you subscribe to the show. Second, make sure you share it with someone you care about, because sharing is caring. And third, head on over to join me in my next free virtual exclusive workshop, where we'll explore proven strategies to boost your business and maximize your potential. Look, it doesn't matter if you're just starting out or if you're looking to take your business to the next level, my workshops are designed for you. So head on over to expertinyouworkshop.com to reserve your spot and get ready to transform your expertise into extraordinary success. I'm looking forward to seeing you there and helping you achieve incredible growth. Until next time, make sure you're always seeking the expert in you, and God bless. Have an amazing day.